It's 2002, and Steven Soderbergh is coming off what is arguably the most successful period of his career. His 2000 films, Aaron Brockovich and Traffic, both won Oscars, including a Best Director for Soderbergh. In 2001, Ocean's 11 was a star-studded success. If you're Steven Soderbergh, what do you do next?
You make a low-budget, shot-on-video, quickie movie that almost nobody will love.
You got it, Mike. Soderbergh's always gonna Soderbergh, and that's why we love the guy. Welcome to the Filmographers podcast, where we study a director's entire career, one film at a time. I'm Keir Graff.
And I'm Michael Moreci. In our first season, we're turning the spotlight on Steven Soderbergh, one of Hollywood's most fascinating and versatile directors. We discuss why each of his films succeeded or failed, always looking at them in the context of the Hollywood landscape at the time they were released.
As always, we want to know how working artists make a living doing what they love, because we are working artists who make a living doing what we love. We hope you'll join us on our journey to watch or rewatch all of Soderbergh's movies. And be warned, we do share spoilers. Mike, just so listeners know what they're getting into today, please kick us off with your one-sentence summary of Steven Soderbergh's 2002 feature, Frontal.
You got it. So here goes. The lives of an eclectic cast of characters collide over the course of a single day, confronting difficult truths about themselves, others, and the opposite sex, all while making a movie written by the characters in the movie, or at least that's what I think. I'm not sure.
What do a producer, a dominatrix, a reporter, and a movie star have in common? They're all doing something behind closed doors in Hollywood. From Oscar-winning director Steven Soderbergh comes the unauthorized companion piece to Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
When was the last time you made $500 for 30 seconds?
You're cruel.
Can a brother get some love?
I like you, David.
Are you?
Put that chair against the door.
I am on to you.
Oh, my.
I read that chocolate can kill dogs. Tell me what to do. Induce what?
You can't moan or grunt. No, too loud.
Full Frontal.
I want to say this film divides viewers, but that implies there are two camps of roughly equal size. I guess it's more accurate to say it divides viewers into one very large camp that doesn't like it, and a few lonely souls like me who do. But before we get into whether it's actually any good, I want to set it up a little bit. Well before Ocean's 11, Soderbergh had been working with actress and playwright Coleman Huff. She was working as a publicist's assistant at Disney and doing plays at LA theaters when Soderbergh saw her in one of her plays. He gave her an uncredited role in Schizopolis and, according to The Hollywood Reporter, hired her to write an adaptation of Julius Caesar that was never made.
Yeah, I mean, given that their relationship started with Schizopolis, I'm starting to see how Full Frontal came about. Though, I will say this little aside. When you said Julius Caesar, my mind went to Hail Caesar, which is the Coen brothers movie that, like Full Frontal, is about the movie-making business. But unlike Full Frontal, I actually like Hail Caesar.
That's a movie I don't care for very much, Mike.
Sorry, you don't?
I don't like Hail Caesar that much.
Wow, we're really, oh man.
This is the Siskel and Ebert moment in our podcast.
This is going to be the moment. We're going to come out stronger the other side.
Can I be Roger today, though?
Well,
you got to be Roger last time.
I'm bald, so I guess I get to be.
Oh.
I'm Gene. I'll do it. It's all right. So, okay. So that aside, Roger, I wish I could, if I were truly Gene, I would really have something. You say he was the master of saying something very snide, succinct, and quick, and then jumping to the next subject. He'd be like, oh yeah, blah, blah, snide really thing. So next.
Yeah, Siskel shivs you in the ribs and then quickly turns and starts a new conversation.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he was the master of that. Oh man, I love that guy.
But not as much as Ebert.
No. Oh boy, I miss those guys. Hail Caesar aside, like how actually accurate is this? Like about the Julius Caesar stuff? Was Soderbergh about to make his like Cleopatra at this point?
I want it to be true, but I just don't know. It's the only reference I've ever come across to that. And that article in The Hollywood Reporter did get at least one significant fact wrong, which casts doubt on the credibility of the entire enterprise, if you ask me. when it claimed Huff's 2003 play Shipping and Receiving became Full Frontal, because that's obviously impossible, given that Full Frontal was filmed in 2001. So who knows? We know the Hollywood press sometimes plays a little fast and loose with the facts. So
No.
I'm shocked to find out this is going on. Hopefully we will unearth something later this year about Soderbergh's Julius Caesar. I would love to know more.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I guess the biggest question I have was the scope. Is really like, was this
Right.
going to be like a big? That's what I meant when I'm joking about the
Yeah.
Cleopatra thing, but it was just like a roadshow, big Hollywood thing that he was going to do.
Who knows? Or is it a Coen Brothers Macbeth where it's going to be stylized and small?
Yeah, I don't know. Coen Brothers references aplenty though today. Wow,
For sure. Well, at least we're giving Tarantino a break and Fincher as well.
We'll get to him.
So anyway, Soderbergh himself has confirmed that he had read some of Huff's one-act plays, all of which featured two characters, and he worked with her to map out an ensemble story featuring the characters interacting in different combinations. He saw it as a small movie from the start. In a very sad note to all of this, Huff died in February of this year at the age of 62 after a 2-decade battle with Parkinson's.
Full Frontal for me was sort of a 2-pack that went with Ocean's 11 that I really felt like I shouldn't make Ocean's 11 unless I immediately follow it with something like Full Frontal for a lot of reasons. One was just the disparity of scale really appealed to me. And to follow a movie that's really the least threatening movie I've ever made with one of the more provocative and challenging movies that I've made seemed to be a good way to go.
Soderbergh pitched it to Harvey Weinstein at Miramax, more on Weinstein later, saying that if he were to make a Sex, Lies, and Videotape again today, it would be something like this. He called it a karmic sequel, even though it really had nothing to do with his debut. But mentioning Sex, Lies had to be an effective pitch since that movie had made that studio $100 million.
Sex Lies was his, obviously we all know his debut, and that was with Miramax, and it's tied. I mean, the rise of Miramax and its prominence and everything that it became to be, especially in the 90s, is tied to Sex, Lies, and Videotape. But he hadn't worked, Soderbergh, that is, hadn't worked with Miramax since, 11 movies gone by. And it's not like he jumped to the mainstream. It's not like he went to Sex, Lies to Ocean's 11 or something like that.
Right.
As filmmakers do now, where it's like you make a small movie and then you make Iron Man 7. But now, he had a period of still making small, but it's weird that he never worked with Miramax again. Is there any insight into that?
I don't. And, one can only theorize. I mean, revisionist history and wishful thinking, one would love to think that, Soderbergh, saw something unpalatable in the character of Harvey Weinstein and kind of wanted to keep his distance. I have nothing to back that up. I don't want to sound like the Hollywood Reporter. I just don't know. I would think that Miramax would have definitely wanted to work with him. Again, he made them a lot of money. He arguably was still kind of making Miramax style movies, although sometimes there are some little bits and pieces I picked up from Soderbergh in commentary and things where he kind of has a little bit of wry humor about a Miramax type film. And so, Miramax was making sometimes films that I now regard as somewhat cheesy and then kind of, hyping them as Oscar bait and all this. And maybe that's just not the vibe that Soderbergh was wanting. And maybe it was just a mutual thing where they didn't have the right project. And the only reason he kind of went back to them was that this was going to be a difficult film to find a distributor for, to get money for. And since it was a quote unquote karmic sequel to Sex, Lies, it just made sense to go back to Miramax. Maybe it's as simple as that.
Yeah, sometimes it's the Occam's razor, answer. But yeah, I do wonder, because I have to look. I think Miramax passed on Schizopolis. I think I remember reading that in the Getting Away with It journal or whatever. It's the interviews with Lester Banks. I feel like they passed on Schizopolis, if I'm not mistaken. So there might have just not been something to their taste. Like you said, who knows? Could be very simple answers in here.
Sure. the connection between those two movies was clearly somehow useful to at least marketing, getting the buzz of the movie going out, because the film was first announced as an unofficial sequel of sorts. Again, that's a quote, but it's weasel words. You know, they're trying to kind of like sprinkle some of the stardust of Sex Lies on this project, even though Soderbergh was clear from the start that it had nothing really to do with that. And so confusion about whether it was or wasn't a sequel persisted for a while. On September 10th, 2001, the title was announced as How to Survive a Hotel Room Fire. One day later, that title didn't seem so funny, and soon it had a new title, The Art of Negotiating a Turn.
All these titles fucking suck, by the way. Sorry.
I mean, yeah. How to Survive a Hotel Room Fire, not a great title, but at least piques my interest. The Art of Negotiating a Turn, terrible title.
Yeah, I don't even know what the connection is. Sorry to interrupt you, but...
So this was written about in the trade industry journal Hotel Business, which is where I get all my film news. But it's interesting. I love how like trade journals, if a film, you know, has anything to do with their business, then they get to write about Hollywood, which makes their, you know, hotel business readership interested. So they'll do it if they can. But, you know, this was sort of related because, it was all the post 9/11 stuff. And they wrote, quote, the plot of the film, which focuses on the art of surviving a relationship, is still under wraps, but supposedly hinged on a manual called How to Survive a Hotel Room Fire, to which the main characters refer. It gave tips such as closing the windows, staying near to the ground, etc. So again, end quote. The business journal aspect, they have to get into the actual practical tips. But it is interesting to see kind of an early glimpse of what the film might have been. The finished film bears no resemblance to that whatsoever. And Weinstein agreed with both of us. He hated the title. He quite rightly thought it was one of the worst titles he'd ever heard in his life. So Soderbergh came up with Full Frontal in an effort to appease him. And in an interview, he later called it, quote, an attempt to excite Harvey Weinstein, end quote, and also, quote, a naked, transparent marketing ploy, end quote.
Ugh. Yeah, I cringe because I don't want to. The words Harvey Weinstein, excite, and naked altogether are. I'm pulling my collar here.
We don't want those to be in the same sense. We don't even want to think about Harvey Weinstein, even though he's back in headlines as we record this.
Yeah,
he unfortunately for the rest of the world got some good court news. Anyway, so that language, none of that dates well. So back to the pre-production and the timeline. Ocean's 11 wrapped in June 2001, and Full Frontal started shooting on November 6th with a budget of $2 million. Soderbergh clearly doesn't seem like a guy who knows how to enjoy time off. Remember, folks, this is an Oscar-winning director who can make any movie he wants, and this is the movie he wants to make next. So, although it has since been largely forgotten by filmgoers, it is an interesting footnote in film history for a number of reasons, but one of the primary reasons is because Soderbergh wrote a manifesto.
He sure did. Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly, you know, and is it Dogma 95?
Yeah, I
Dogma?
think people referring to the Lars von Trier crowd often say Dogma 95, but I think it's Dogma or something in Danish or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not going to act like I am, you know, that cosmopolitan to speak these fancy words, you know.
Just a couple of regular guys here, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Which actually, for those who don't know, in Chicago is one of our local film critics. He was the regular guy on XRT. Love that guy.
Regular guy.
Just a regular guy. Let's go have some sausage. So anyway, the manifesto reflects Soderbergh's passion for the unadulterated craft of filmmaking and, you know, working with actors without all the Hollywood BS. You know, that's what he was after. When he sent the scripts to his actors, he included 10 rules they would have to follow if they wanted to be in the picture. Okay, so we've got the 10 rules here.
These are worth reading. They're fascinating.
Yeah, which actually kind of reminds me of we were talking in the last episode, the Oulipo stuff. The putting restrictions on, and restrictions sometimes create creativity. You know?
Absolutely,
it's good. It's good to have them. They don't always work, but so number 1, all sets are practical locations. 2, you will drive yourself to the set. If you are unable to drive yourself, a driver will pick you up, but you will probably become the subject of ridicule. Either way, you must arrive alone.
I love that one so much. It's so great.
Like, you will be the subject of ridicule, which is such an, like, he knows, like, this actor is like, you can drive a car.
You live in Hollywood.
Yes. You are old enough. You are an adult. 3, there'll be no craft service. You should arrive on set having had. Meals will vary in quality, which I find a bummer. I love craft services. I just like having snacks around. I don't know. 4, you will pick, provide, and maintain your own wardrobe. 5, you will create and maintain your own hair and makeup. 6, there will be no trailers. The company will attempt to provide holding areas near a given location, but don't count on it. If you need to be alone a lot, you're pretty much screwed. Fair. 7, improvisation will be encouraged. 8, you will be interviewed about your character. This material may end up in the film.
A quick pause here.
Yeah.
This is really, really an important one because, in fact, the in-character interviews the actors did as part of their preparation for this film ended up being used heavily in the film as voiceover. And so here's another, we talked a lot last week and in other episodes as well about the way Soderbergh is very comfortable ceding control over things to actors. It's not like saying, it's not the same thing as saying that he lets them run the show, but he really lets them contribute. And their contributions, whether you like this film or not, become really, really important. And I was fascinated to learn the depth at which these actors were capable of thinking about their characters. They came up with really interesting backstories and stuff. And then that in turn drove the plot to the movie, and it's used extensively throughout. I found it fascinating.
I do give credit for that. I mean, it is pretty cool. You know, I could see it backfiring. I guess it depends on the conditions, because some actors would be like, oh man, I just want to come read my lines, you know, like, but it just depends. It depends on the director, depends on the conditions, depends on the performer. So getting the right people and having them fully on board, you can get some really great stuff with that. So I do like it. And I do like what they came up, that the stuff that you see that ended up in the movie is important and it's cool. So yeah, again, I'll get on board with that part of Full Frontal. 9, you will be interviewed about the other characters. This material may end up in the finished film. 10, you will have fun whether you want to or not. If any of these guidelines are problematic for you, stop reading now and send the screenplay back where it came from. You could have made that like rule 2. That's a little deep and too late now.
A little late, yeah.
Yeah.
Not only all of this, but they would all be working for Screen Actors Guild scale. So Brad Pitt, who is in this movie, was probably paid less than $1,000 for his part in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that makes Full Frontal unique and interesting, in addition to that, and divisive, and a little unwatchable, is that Soderbergh planned to shoot most of it on a consumer digital video camera, the Canon XL1S.
And so it came to pass. Production concluded on November 30th after 18 days of shooting. A week later, on December 7th, 2001, Ocean's 11 was released. These films would have very different receptions.
Because part of what the movie's about is questioning why a certain style of shooting and a certain aesthetic is more real to you than another style, when it's all fake. And so it was important to me that the DV footage be shot with a consumer camera and look like it was done sort of by an amateur who was just trying to track these characters. You know, I talked a lot about Cops, you know, that I wanted people to think, you know, that they were watching sort of relationship version of Cops. And I stuck to that, you know, and it was great for the actors because you got to work. You know, there wasn't, okay, we got that part of the scene, now we're going to do this part of the scene, and then you got to hit this mark, and then we're going to do your close-up. And it was literally, if we got the scene and felt good about what we did, that was it, and we were moving on.
Mike, let's get down to it. Did you like Full Frontal?
You know, I feel like I've spoiled this already, given my very tepid contributions thus far. You know, I'm trying to find a way to look, I didn't hate it. There's movies that I see that make me actively upset.
Sure.
And even angry. This is not one of them. By no means. You know, like, I'm puzzled by it, and we'll talk about this. I am deeply puzzled by, I wouldn't say puzzled. I guess I'm not puzzled by his decision for him to do this, you know, given the streak he was on, because I do artistically get it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe deep down I'm jealous, because I'm like, wow, like, guts. Man. But you know what? If you could survive the underneath shit, you can survive anything. So why not? Look, okay. Specific to this movie. First of all, we mentioned the camera, and I'm going to be blunt. I find most of it aesthetically, aesthetically unwatchable. It was made on my dad's camcorder. And I don't want to watch a whole movie like that. Like, I just don't. Like, it looks, I'm sorry. I like, you know, we'll discuss this more down the road. You know, we come to find that, like, Soderbergh's certainly not done with experimenting with his cameras and how he shoots at digital and iPhones and stuff like that. And I actually do come to really like that stuff. I really do. And I admire that what he's trying to do in terms of, like, strip things down even more. But he did a little too soon. You know, the technology's not there, and it looks terrible. The lighting is terrible. The pixelation, if you blow it up to the screen any bigger than like 12 inches, it's like...
It's true. I having watched this on a, you know, television of medium size, I can't imagine what it looked like in the theater.
Yeah.
Would have been rough.
Yeah, that's the thing that, like, it's like you really have to consider, especially then and there, when you were still talking, we're way before streaming and iPhones and things like that. Like, you're watching this on a movie theater is the primary driver of the audience upon release, and put this thing on a big screen has had to be torturous. I mean, even now, I mean, like, granted, home screens have gotten bigger now, so like watching it on, you know, a 70-inch whatever is also unflattering. But I don't know that there's any inch that is flattering to this. But it's like, I was watching it though, and I'm like, when they started it, so I hadn't seen this before. This is one of my Soderbergh blind spots. And I was watching it, and I was like, well, you know, surely this won't last too long. It's like 75. It's most of the movie is that. And they do the film within the film stuff.
Yeah,
is, you know, proper. I don't say proper. That's a bad thing to say, because there's not a proper way to make film. You make it how you make it and with what you have. But the thing that looks like a mainstream movie was far less of that. And
even that doesn't look that great. He himself said he wanted it to be well lit and look decent, but he said kind of like cable TV good. Like, he wasn't going for like the best he could do. He was looking for like pretty good.
Yeah, which I wonder is the point. I feel like, given the content of that, like this like crappy romantic, you know, I wonder if he was going for, you know, where's the light coming from? Everywhere. So like the light source is 360 degrees, you know, it's like a Telemundo, you know. So, you know, getting past that, that being how it looked, what it was filmed on, I still didn't enjoy much, if any. You know, I'm going to sound potentially stupid, and I know that, and I'm always apprehensive to, you know, out myself as saying, like, I didn't get it. Like, I got it sort of. I struggled to find the point or the reason or really anything to really, you know, a lifesaver to like grip onto in this experiment. And I found myself thinking, I was like, well, you know, maybe I should watch it again. Maybe I missed something the first time, and a second viewing will cure what ails me, because that's happened to me with movies. We were just talking about Synecdoche, New York, which is a movie that felt very flat for me the first time, and now I love it. I absolutely loved it on second viewing. So I do that, and I do it often. You know, I'm kind of like a filmmaker's dream, because I watch a movie and I'm like, oh man, I failed this movie, not not the other way around. It's not the movie's fault.
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah. But, you know, this case, you know, I just didn't feel compelled for one thing.
Sure.
But I also reminded myself, had a little bit more discipline, where I said, you know, that most people are going to view a movie one time and one time only, most likely. And as a filmmaker, you owe it to them to succeed somewhat, at least on some level, in the first go around. And this movie just it just didn't succeed for me on any level, you know? And maybe it's also my aversion. Like I really, oh, Keir, I really hate this growing culture of rediscovery, you know, like and I'm throwing up quotes, the misunderstood gems, like we're rediscovering every piece of shit from the last 50 years and being like, well, actually it's like, like some movies are great and we missed it. You know, we missed the boat on Blade Runner. Yeah. Like that. People came out and they were like, whoops. But like, you know, Terminal Velocity with Charlie Sheen, like, no, dude, that's bad. It was bad then. It's bad now. Please, God, please stop. Like, right. Let's discover some good new stuff that's being made now, maybe. Yeah. We just don't need to be dedicating. Yeah. I hope people know that that doesn't last forever. Like, life is precious. Yeah. So what about you? Full Frontal. Give me your full. I'm going to expose it all. I'm going to bear it all, Mike. Good. Okay. You saved me on that one. So, yeah, I'm going to come right out and say, I like this movie. At the same time, I don't like it in a way that I'm going to encourage everybody else to run out and watch it, because I suspect that most other people will not like it. And saying that, I also don't want to sound like that asshat who is like, well, I really liked it, but it's not for the rest of you, because I don't see it. I'm not trying to say that in any way. It's not like it's this cool club thing where I understand it and other people don't. I'm just saying that I personally found a lot of compelling stuff in this film, and I suspect that will not translate for most people. Maybe I'm weird, maybe whatever. You know, honestly, the deeper we go into Soderbergh's oeuvre, like the more I wonder about my ability to be objective, you know, because it's like, obviously we're here to study Soderbergh. So it's like, am I finding, you know, gold under a rock that, you know, it's actually fool's gold? I don't know. But as a viewer, I will say, like you, I had not seen this before. Oh, I thought you had. I had not. Oh, and interesting. So watching it for the pod was my first time watching it, and I was actually engaged. I was irritated by a few of the things you were like. I could see what he was going for with the visuals, and I did find it kind of a little ugly. I mean, he calls it ugly himself in the director's commentary. He says, well, and here now begins the ugly part of the film, or something like that. You know, I was puzzled by a few of the choices. I didn't love some things. I did think the performances were very good, generally speaking, especially those of David Hyde Pierce and Mary McCormack. I thought they were quite good. David Hyde Pierce was excellent. Mm-hmm. And I thought that compared to most Hollywood films about Hollywood, you know, it wasn't nearly as self-indulgent, which I know that sounds insane because most people probably see this film as hugely self-indulgent. But I really think that this was more about indulging an intellectual exercise than indulging Soderbergh's ego, if that makes sense. I think that's very fair. And then, you know, I found myself engaged intellectually, and like the more I thought about it, the more I appreciated it. You know, Soderbergh is really making an independent film. He was really thinking like an indie artist. I mean, he made a manifesto, for crying out loud. Google filmmaking manifestos. That's some interesting reading. He has a big question. He's exploring it through his art, and he doesn't particularly care how many people get it or don't get it, because he's just given them Brockovich, Traffic, and Ocean's 11. He's probably confident he can deliver another crowd pleaser if he wants to. And I also want to say, like, I don't think that he's being indifferent to the audience. I don't think it's the same thing as not caring about the audience. I think that he's not caring about a wide audience. I think he's probably thinking this will connect with people, but a smaller number of people. And for me, it did, I can't believe I'm saying this, it really improved with repeated viewings. I've now watched it 3 times, which I think most people probably would not be able to fathom doing that. But for me, each viewing really unlocked new nuances. I think if it has a flaw, and it has flaws, but its biggest flaw is that he lost sight of the classic Soderberghian tenet of simplicity. And, you know, we talked last week about how in Ocean's 11, he is able to take a pretty complex story with a lot of moving parts and a lot of characters and really make it easy to follow. And he didn't do that here. And that is a failing of the film.
And the first time you watch it, you can be confused. Like, wait, what's the movie within the movie? Even though he's giving you all these signals, like the quote unquote real life stuff is in the grainy video and the film within the film is more polished. He's giving us all these signals, but there are enough overlapping stories and enough people appearing in different moments of other people's stories that it is confusing. I missed a lot of little things the first time around that started to fall into place the second and even third time around. Watching it for the third time yesterday, stuff started to click and I was like, oh my gosh, like that's great. Like honestly, the first viewing, I missed the fact that the playwright who's directing a play about Hitler in this little theater in LA was actually one of two screenwriters for the film within the film. And that the other screenwriter for the film within the film is the David Hyde Pierce character. Like I missed both of those things the first time around. And then the second time I realized one of them was a screenwriter. And then I didn't even realize they were both screenwriters until the third time, which is, I could be as generous as you and say that's on me, Steve, but I think that was on Steve. I think he was giving us too much information. But the more I watched it, the more I liked putting that puzzle together. And the more I actually found it kind of emotionally compelling. I started to understand the depth of the trauma in the Catherine Keener character's life and the trauma that she and her sister had shared when they were young. And then her husband, I'm always forgetting the characters' names here, but the David Hyde Pierce character's generosity towards his wife, who Keener's character as an HR vice president who is hell on wheels.
Yeah.
It's partly funny, it's partly painful, and it's partly sad. All of that started to really resonate more for me. And I found some of the funnier parts funnier than I had the first viewing. So it's a movie that rewards multiple viewings, but probably shouldn't require them.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I think that like something for me that you hit on was, it should. And maybe that's why I didn't go back to revisit it, because like I said, I really wasn't that interested, but also like, I'm guessing a little frustrated that this easy stuff's not that easy. Like the two screenwriters, I did get that, but like they don't share screen time together once. They don't have a single conversation.
They don't seem to have any kind of relationship, except they refer to each other a couple of times.
Yeah, like there's really it's hard to connect those things. Like the movie within the movie, I think is really hard because like you're behind the scenes of a movie at some point in the movie. So you're like, is this the movie? Like what movie? Because they're like, he's like making a movie with Brad Pitt, but then he's being like interviewed about it. So I'm like, wait, what? Like
I got lost in that. I got lost. And then there's this amazing like breaking of the fourth wall where in the movie within the movie, they are on a movie set. The Julia Roberts character plays a reporter who is interviewing Blair Underwood, who plays an actor, and they're on the set of the movie that Underwood's making with Brad Pitt. And then there's this break of the fourth wall where they're like, okay, are we cut? Is this a cut? And then it cuts to the quote unquote real movie that we're all watching, and it picks up, and then there's a different director. So David Fincher plays the director of the fake movie, which is a nice little touch.
There he is. I knew we'd get to him.
And then Soderbergh plays the director of the actual movie. However, he didn't want to be in it, so he blacked his own face out. He wanted to get another actual director to play him, but couldn't get anybody to show up on set. So he did it under duress and then censored his own face, which again, it's just all needlessly complicated. I will grant that.
Yeah.
All fair criticisms.
Tough.
But ultimately, like the human interactions and the human stories started to work for me. And I feel like it's ultimately, as many Soderbergh films are, his more personal films, it's kind of about people's ability or inability to connect on a very simple level. And it's also the more indie experimental aspect of it seems to be about kind of like, how can we get an audience to engage with a film? Like, how do we determine what's worthy of engaging with or not? Because he's using a very reasonably slick looking film within a film that's the more traditional looking film that you aesthetically, you look at that film and you sort of think like, oh, this is the kind of thing like I want to get into that because it's easier on the eyes.
Right.
But it's kind of an insipid movie. And, they draw a line under that joke at the very end when Roberts and Underwood like turn towards the camera and mug, and it's just, ugh.
Yeah.
It's not a good movie, but it looks better. And then the actual movie, Full Frontal, which I find to be a good movie and you don't, but that is aesthetically ugly. And it's like he's kind of daring us to connect with that. And clearly most people didn't accept that dare.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more real, it's ugly, but it's real and it's honest, and that's, like you said, he's struggling, people struggling to connect. All those things are absolutely relevant, true. I just found it unnecessarily complicated. I think that's one thing we'll agree on is like how much you're willing to endure the complications, I think is what the mileage you'll get out of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's our common ground, Gene. And I think it was needlessly complicated.
Yeah. And I think that like what also is a strike against me, and I want to hear your thoughts about this. Like I don't really love movies about movies. And I gotta explain that because like I like movies about like Hollywood history. Like I Will Die on the Hill of Babylon.
That's your lonely hill to die on.
Yeah, it is my lonely hill to die on. I love, if people don't know, Damien Chazelle from last year, or is it 2 years ago now? Technically, I think it was technically released in 22.
That might be
late 22. But yes, I love Babylon. But generally, movies about like the Hollywood insiders and like movies that are like Hollywood's so fake. Am I right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Like I'm just not.
Once again, I'm shocked.
I'm just not into it. And I feel like part of that was this, like, it's like the Hollywood stuff is fake. Hollywood's so fake. What's real is getting away from Hollywood and real human interaction. And I find that kind of boring. I never really like that stuff. So I don't know how much mileage you get out of that.
I take your point and agree largely with it. Although it's interesting, just in my response to this film, that wasn't kind of what I was taking away, but I could totally see how and maybe many others would read it that way. And that was part of his intent, is like the fakiness of the film within the film.
Right.
But I agree. Like there are some wicked, we'll talk about this more in a little bit, but like there are some wicked Hollywood satires I love, and that's fine. But I agree. It's no news to anybody that it's a little bit of a vanity project out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Hollywood is fake is not news to anybody.
Hi, this is Keir with a short interruption. I really hope you're enjoying the first season of the Filmographers podcast. Mike and I love making this show, and we're completely geeked to continue our journey to the center of the Soderberghian universe. We truly hope you'll keep listening, but today, we're asking for your help.
Wait. Is this, oh my God, Keir, is this a pledge drive?
We're not part of Big Podcast. We're not even part of Little Podcast. We don't have a $100 million deal with Spotify or even a pay-to-play arrangement with a fake network you've never heard of.
That's right. We're proudly independent. It's just the two of us in Chicago and our producer Kevin Lau in Champaign, Illinois. But it sounds like you're about to ask our listeners for money, Keir.
I'm not asking them to listen to ads for BetterHelp, Blue Apron, or a mattress that comes in a box. I am asking them to join our Patreon community at patreon.com/thefilmographerspodcast. With only a modest donation, they can help cover our expenses in producing this show. We are not a recognized not-for-profit organization, but this is truly a not-for-profit organization.
All right, well, how much do you want? Get to the numbers.
How's this for a number? 0. Members who join our free tier, the Limey, will get access to not only all of our regular episodes, but also our monthly newsletter, where we'll fill them in on what we've been watching, reading, and thinking about.
Yeah, not bad. I can't wait to read that myself.
Don't forget that you also have to help write it. And for only $2 a month, the Magic Mike, listeners will get all of our regular episodes, ad-free, plus our monthly newsletter, access to listener polls, and other bonus content like essays and extended versions of the show.
Keep going.
For $4 a month, the Cisco, listeners will get everything we've already mentioned, plus our every other month Patreon exclusive episodes, like our one about the films Soderbergh didn't make. We're planning to discuss Soderbergh's short films, documentaries, TV series, and more. All that for an amount that's less than your daily Starbucks, Mike.
You totally cribbed that from public radio pledge drives, didn't you?
Wait till you hear my painstakingly accurate pronunciations of place names from around the world. Filmographers superfans can be do-gooders like Aaron Brockovich and support us at our highest level of $6 per month. For that, they get everything I've already mentioned and an every other month commentary track. And not only that, these sustaining members will have the warm, fuzzy glow of knowing they're supporting the Filmographers' mission by helping subsidize valuable minutes of editing and the services we need to make and distribute new episodes. Maybe we'll even be able to replace the tattered windscreens on our microphones.
We at the Filmographers podcast spend countless hours watching movies, listening to commentary tracks, reading interviews and articles, and Googling until our fingers are raw and chapped. Nobody should have to spend so much time on IMDb. My God, that interface.
But we do it all for you, our listeners. Visit patreon.com/The Filmographers Podcast today to show your support for the Filmographers Podcast. Please note that we cannot accept used cars at this time. You know, this is probably doing it totally out of order, but I just feel like we've probably already confused listeners enough. So I'm going to take a moment. So bear with us now that we've really confused you. Maybe we can just simplify the plot a little bit. We don't usually do a lot of plot summary in this pod because you can look up plot summaries wherever, and hopefully you're watching the films. But just because most of you won't be able to find this movie anywhere, I want to just try to explain it a little bit more. So essentially it follows 6 major characters through one tumultuous day in Hollywood. So each one has their own plot line, but they're all fated to converge at a party that evening for a film producer named Gus, played by David Duchovny. And that is foreshadowed at the very beginning of the film. And I think one of the better things he did in terms of breaking up the confusion was to open with introducing each character. And there's like a title card that says how they were invited to this party or whether they were even invited. So for some, it says not invited or thinks they're invited, but is really a +1. Yeah. So it does foreshadow that they're all going to meet at some point in the film at a singular event. And I think that's a good idea.
You know, it's funny. I have a fun fact for you, but first, I wonder if that was. It makes me think, as we're talking about, like that this movie is a little confusing. Could have been a little clearer. I wonder if that's something that what you described that he added later, like Schizopolis, where I was like, oh shit, I need an intro here.
I wonder.
It seems possible.
When in discussing those cards in the commentary, he does not say whether that was the idea all along or whether it was added later. That certainly seems very Soderberghian to add it later in an attempt to clarify. It's the kind of thing he would do.
Yeah, maybe. Just Aaron thought there. But anyway, the fun fact is both Duchovny and Pierce auditioned for James Spader's role in Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And Soderbergh said he could tell they were both destined for greater things, and he was right. And he'd been wanting to work with them since that time, which is 1989. So what is this, 13 years later? But the right project never came along until now.
I mean, that's pretty amazing that he, maybe he's inventing that a little bit, or maybe he's just telling the truth and really filed them away. And that's pretty remarkable. But he is obviously, as we've said ad nauseum, an actor's director. So David Hyde Pierce plays Carl, who's one half of the screenwriting team that makes the movie within the movie. And he's also the husband of Lee, played by Catherine Keener, who's a sadistic HR VP. Just sadistic. It's painful at times, but she's clearly such an unhappy person. She's taking it out on these people that she's doing a bunch of layoffs, and she is insulting to some people. Others she kind of flirts with and then puts them down. She makes people do ridiculous things. And this is where it does feel a little bit like maybe an indulgent indie film. Like she's got an inflatable globe and she throws it at people and makes them, quizzes them on what are the countries in Africa or things like that.
Yeah, a little too quirky.
Yeah, fair. Could be quirky for quirkiness' sake. Anyway, I did think that the performances throughout were quite strong. Mary McCormack plays Linda, Lee's sister, a masseuse who has a gross encounter with Gus. And the always electric Nikki Katt, love Nikki Katt, plays an actor playing a quote hip Hitler in a theatrical production for Artie, who's played by Enrico Colantoni. Their plot line barely connects with the rest of the movie, but is very entertaining. Soderbergh, who clearly has a fondness for Nicky Katt, said that Hitler was a dream role for him.
Why? I'd like to know more.
Yeah.
Like, I need to play Hitler.
Yeah, Katt seems like a guy seems like kind of a confrontational cat, if you ask me.
he's not around anymore. So I wonder. I mean, I like him. I like Nicky Katt. When he comes in a movie, I'm like, oh, cool, Nicky Katt's here. He had a lot of
the screen lights up.
Yeah, he had a lot of good late 90s, early 2000s. He had a good run.
Yeah.
He has since. He's not really around, but it might be some personality stuff there. Somebody who's itching to play Hitler, and the intensity on screen that he usually portrays. There's just some signals there.
Yeah, he's not worried about being off-putting, and certainly some people maybe just some people are in today's sensibility. Some people be put off by the idea of having a play about Hitler at all. This is a little more in the tradition of Springtime for Hitler, if you ask me, because it's they're not like whatever. It's not gratuitous. It's an idea, and I think too there's something about because the play within the movie it's not quite a one man play, but it's about Hitler in relationships, and it's Hitler dumping a girlfriend basically, and so that does play off in a weird way on the actual movie we're watching.
Yeah,
like if the world's most unlovable, the worst person in the world, like can we contemplate him having a love life? Can we even think about that? I'm certainly not sympathetic to him, but Hitler was a vegetarian too, as somebody said.
Oh my.
Anywho, the stars of the film, I guess you could say, are Julie Roberts as Francesca / Catherine and Blair Underwood as Calvin / Nicholas. We did kind of explain what's going on with their role, or maybe let's clarify it again. Can you kind of clarify what's going on with their roles, just in case we confuse people?
As best I can. They're in a romantic comedy. I assume it's a comedy, but it's a romantic film. It seems like a will they, won't they. There's some misunderstandings about a letter that somebody wrote, a love letter that like is seemingly bringing people together. And it's just a cheesy romantic comedy, that like has some sort of, and this is where I'm going to stumble, has some sort of meta film element to it as well, because I'm assuming Blair Underwood is an actor in this movie, and he's in a movie with Brad Pitt, an action cop movie.
Yes,
which he loves. Going back to Schizopolis, like Soderbergh likes making action cop movies within his movies.
Yes, yeah, and making fun of them a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But also maybe a self-reflective. It's like, maybe I should be making a action cop buddy movie with Brad Pitt and Blair Underwood. Right. It's not a bad idea. But yeah, I mean, that's the gist from what we get.
Julia Roberts plays a magazine writer for Los Angeles Magazine, which is the occupation of Carl in the quote unquote real film. And there's a little bit of a joke that to me got funnier and funnier, in that Carl is somewhat unimaginative as a screenwriter, because he gives the Julia Roberts character basically his job, like writer for magazine, but then also gives her some pretty funny dialogue that refers to himself. Like, I have a colleague at the magazine who's somewhat misunderstood, and actually I had a dream about him the other night. I don't know why. Well, I can see why I would dream about him. So he writes dialogue for Julia Roberts basically to say she's having dreams about him. I found that funny.
Yeah,
Gene, I really feel like I can totally see Roger Ebert finding that funny, but he didn't.
No, I don't think. I say, wait a minute. He did not.
He did not. He hated this movie.
Yeah, and this is sadly past Gene's time.
Yeah,
I think Gene would have hated it.
Yeah, I think they would have been 2 thumbs down all the way.
Solid.
So in all the other weird Hall of Mirrors moments, Duchovny plays the sexually coercive producer of Rendezvous, the film within the film, and Jeff Garlin, who has since also been Me Too'd.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Does an amazing Harvey Weinstein impression. I I don't know. I feel like the less said about Harvey Weinstein in this podcast, the better.
Yeah, I think it would have been, we could have gotten maybe some more getting into him, but like after this recent news, it's hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about Weinstein in general, but now that what is it? He's just been exonerated, or not exonerated, but like
an appeal was upheld. They said his trial was not fair to him because they allowed testimony by people who are not directly plaintiffs, as I understand it, which is apparently a dangerous tactic to use because it does improve the odds of the defendant appealing. And as has happened here, Harvey Weinstein obviously should, rot in hell.
And I think that's where we should, as much attention as that he should get, is that we agree he should rot in hell, and screw him.
Yeah. And not to defend Jeff Garlin in any way. I will say that the charges against Garland are not nearly as egregious as Weinstein.
It'd be hard to get to that level.
Yeah. It's not even in the same ballpark, but he certainly is not. Anyway, people can look that up and read about it. He is funny in this movie. He doesn't mean Harvey Weinstein, but it's a weird moment to look back and see all this and just, I don't know, it's
a little gross.
It's outside the film's purview, obviously, because none of this stuff was known or by the general public. But it is a weird note as you're rewatching the film.
Well, luckily, it's so unavailable, no one will have to cancel it.
There you go. It's already been canceled.
It's already canceled.
It's already been canceled. In less icky cameos, David Fincher, as we mentioned, plays a director. Ocean's 11 producer Jerry Weintraub plays a magazine publisher, the publisher of Los Angeles Magazine. Brad Pitt plays himself, as we said, and Terrence Stamp plays the Limey.
My favorite part of the movie. My favorite part of the movie was the Limey.
I did enjoy it, but to me it was more of a little amusing pleasure than the best part of the movie.
Yeah, and it's funny because like you can tell that scene doesn't connect. The plane doesn't look the same. Like that's clearly B-roll for sure.
Well, they actually brought him back to film that.
No, they did.
They did.
It looks so different. It does. Wow. Because I watched a few times, like the chair.
Yeah.
The backing is not the same color.
I think
it doesn't even match.
I think they were. Well, this is interesting because on the commentary, maybe I'm less observant than you, and you are right. But on the commentary, Soderbergh says that he asked Terrence Stamp and the woman who plays opposite him if they could come back and do it, and Stamp said, "Sure, as long as you get me there." He said he was very game, and then Stamp does appear in another scene in this film, but arguably as Terrence Stamp, not as the Limey, because he's just walking through the hotel lobby.
Oh, I didn't even see him.
Yeah. So at the end of the film, as they're all about to go up to the rooftop for Gus's party, Terrence Stamp strides through the lobby.
Wow. Okay, so that makes sense then. That was reshot. Okay. That's a surprise to me. It certainly doesn't look like it.
But they might have been messing with it to make it look more like the Limey.
Maybe.
Soderbergh is messing with us clearly throughout this movie.
Weird.
If you squint closely, you will also see Sandra Oh, Rainn Wilson, and January Jones. But anyway, let's talk about the technique a little bit more. A lot of people have, just hated. You're not alone. A lot of people hated the way this movie looked. Soderbergh's rules for himself included shooting with only available light. He took the video, he scanned it out to a 35 millimeter negative. He pushed it 2 stops to bring out the grain, probably had a dog pee on it or something. He said he wanted it to look like a color Xerox. He also quoted a friend's dad as saying, "I don't understand. They had all these famous actors. I don't know why they couldn't afford a better film."
Movie Friends is a film podcast for everyone, where 2 friends discuss some of the greatest films. Yes, Michelle?
Did you rehearse that?
Well, I'm reading it off a script for the commercial.
It's really not a commercial, it's a promo, but did you really think a script could describe our show?
Words are generally what are used to describe things.
No,
so yes?
No. Our show is fun. It's all about the dynamic between you and me and how you're a movie guy and how I'm definitely not a movie guy.
But you are like a movie guy.
No, and we talk about movies and we talk about life and cats and we're joking all the time. People listen for that stuff, not the movie stuff.
Right, but the movie stuff is like, that's the stuff.
Wow. Maybe you should have rehearsed this more.
Movie Friends. It's a podcast about film.
It's a podcast about friends. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Patreon at Movie Friends Podcast. We want to be your movie friends.
So, Mike, clearly this didn't all work for you, but he also did a lot of this stuff with Traffic and people liked it. Is it that much worse than Traffic?
Yes. Yes. Way worse than Traffic. I mean, look, I understand Soderbergh's creative impulse, and I'll never fault anyone for taking a swing. Like, okay, like you went for it. You did these things, which I'm surprised to see. Like, I thought the digital, the whatever the camera was enough. I didn't know he like went out of his way to make it look worse. Which is, oh boy, talk about commitment. But sometimes, and I know you're a baseball fan, we both are. So you'll get the whatever metaphor, whatever I'm going for here. Like you swing for the fence and miss, and there's a runner on third, and really all you had to do was get a sac fly or just put the ball into play,
It's a guy who's followed the Cubs for a long, long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm with you, and I know our good friend Daniel Krause has often said this too. Like I think we all three have shared this over a beer that like sometimes you really appreciate the big swing because it's just like I'd rather see an interesting failure, but at the same time, it depends. Like you got runners on base, maybe just hit the sac fly. God, we're really torturing this metaphor. So it's clearly, I was kind of winding you up a little bit. I do think it's not as good to look at as Traffic. It's jarring.
No, there's no part of you who are like, this is okay.
Yeah. And I imagine that seeing it in a theater would be a very disorienting experience. It's so, again, it's kind of like, it's why I keep coming back to the fact that this is a true indie film, because it just has it's almost like a 22-year-old indie film director's idea. It's like, I have this concept and I'm going to follow it through to the end of the earth. And again, I love that about him, but it just didn't work for a lot of people, and that's why it's unavailable. That's why this film is not available.
I just wonder if it needed more time in the oven too. Like I don't think it's a flawed premise, and I don't think it's like inherently bad or unsalvageable. But like he's also on a streak of like we've already talked about movie after movie after movie, short timelines. Maybe taking this sort of experiment and this big swing just needed a little bit more time to I don't know what the word, marinate, cook, whatever you want to say, because it also came out like you said, the timeline again in very Soderberghian fashion is very short. I mean, this felt undercooked.
It did. What's interesting though is like, even though he said it isn't really a sequel to Sex, Lies, and Videotape, the more I watched it, the more I kept thinking about it. There are similarities, which is again, it's very interesting because this is his 12th movie, and it does harken back to his first movie in a number of ways. I mean, some of it was just kind of out of his control, probably. Like, both of them were marketed with a certain amount of unwarranted titillation, right? Like they both have titles, right? Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Full Frontal. They sound like they're promising, boobs and, like soft focus. But that ends up just being, I think, more of a coincidence than anything. However, both films have trailers that kind of lean into that.
Sure.
So they're both in a way mismarketed, but on the other hand, Sex, Lies, and Videotape apparently was just sexy enough. I mean, Lara San Giacomo, there's just enough that like people didn't walk out of the theater like Nelson Muntz leaving, Barton Fink or something like that.
Naked Lunch.
Naked Lunch. Darn it. I blew the joke.
Two things wrong with that.
Yeah, I should retake that. Another connection, I guess, would be like on an obvious level, both films had layers of film within film, and both of them mixed film and video, right? Yeah. So again, he's kind of drawing on his debut. Both were shot fast and cheap, and it's hard to imagine Soderbergh wasn't in some sense thinking of his debut when he gave this manifesto to his authors. Like, He's basically now a guy who has all these resources available to him, but he's dictating by fiat through this manifesto, we're going to make this like I made my first film, in a way, right?
Yeah. So he's trying, it's like Schizopolis. I mean, he did a very similar thing where like, I'm going to find conditions in which I can strip it down and try to like turn back the clock in a way. It feels like he's, again, the undercookedness of it. It feels like he's sort of forcing it a little with like this manifesto. Like he's really trying to like, and these are all nation thoughts, but I feel like his almost like, again, using the word forcing it feels a little artificial, and maybe that kind of hampers it as well. Like he's going for it, but again, it just feels like, did he really have something clear in mind in terms of like his objectives with the narrative? Did he really have something clear in mind in terms of how he was going to make it? Or was it just like, it felt like a script that was okay, and I have some ideas on how to shoot it, and let's roll?
I would say that he had a clearer picture of how he wanted to make it in mind than what he wanted it to be about.
I think that's fair.
Although I do think that it is, like so many of his films, it is about the struggle to connect, which seems to be, I don't know if he's in therapy or not, but I imagine there's some discussion about that.
Well, at least, he validated his premise.
Yeah. I'm just going to read an interesting quote from Lawrence Garcia. This film was on Mubi a while back, and Lawrence Garcia wrote this interesting little blog post about it that I think is worth considering. Broadly speaking, Full Frontal is a film about aesthetics, or more specifically, the phoniness of it. That is, it's concerned mainly with the gulf between an object, its presentation, and interpretation, with the LA lifestyle, which includes a neighbor that perpetually wears a Dracula costume, providing the perfect backdrop. If that makes the film sound cerebral, that's because its conception is so rich and multivalent. On a more immediate level, though, it's just an endlessly inventive comedy, though the level of amusement does oscillate wildly through the runtime.
How much was sincerely the Oceans 1, 2, and 3, one for us, one for the studio?
I think that's an idea that someone who doesn't make films would come up with. And certainly no one who knows me would ever characterize me that way. They're all for me. I like making those movies. Those movies are good for me. It's good for me to have opportunities to be playful and not serious. And they also visually give me the opportunity to do things that I can't do in any other film because it wouldn't be appropriate. So I can't work for 2 years on something that isn't for me. Like I couldn't do it.
Hi, it's Keir and Mike again. We hope you've enjoyed learning about the critical response to and box office performance of Steven Soderbergh's Full Frontal. Coming up in a few minutes, Keir and Mike will share some of their favorite Hollywood films about Hollywood films.
I'm particularly looking forward to Mike's picks, and I know you're looking forward to Keir's picks.
We truly hate to interrupt your favorite programming, but we at the Filmographers podcast rely on support from listeners like you to meet our budgetary and programming goals. And as we kick off our summer 2024 pledge drive, we have a special incentive. No, it's not a matching grant from Angie's List, T. Rowe Price, or a generous bequest from the estate of Joan B. Kroc. Anyone who calls in and donates any amount during the rest of the show will be entered in a drawing for...
Wait, I know. An 8-day Viking cruise on the Danube?
No.
A free iPad?
Actually, I just realized people can't call in live because we recorded this a week ago. But we're working on some free beer koozies.
That's almost as good as an iPad. I like that.
You want a 1 in a million chance to win a free iPad? Listen to NPR.
No thanks. I listen to podcasts where everyone listens at the time that's most convenient for them.
Fair enough. And we want to keep making a podcast that is informative, entertaining, and convenient to listen to. So please visit patreon.com/ the Filmographers podcast today and show your support for the Filmographers at whatever level is most comfortable for you.
Okay, so I just want to be clear on one thing. The Filmographers beer koozies, those are real.
I want them to be real. And anyone who donates at patreon.com/the Filmographers podcast will be automatically entered into a random drawing for something cool. Maybe a beer koozie, maybe a hat, maybe a t-shirt. We'll work it out.
How about we wrap this up while we're still ahead?
We now resume our regular broadcast with generous support of listeners like you. Mike, you know I hate the tomato meter, but it is sometimes interesting as a baseline comparison. Ocean's 11 scores 83%, while Full Frontal registers 39% with a 27% audience score. Critics didn't like it. We could fill a full hour with the negative reviews, but let's talk about a couple of the highlights.
Yeah, I think you mean lowlights. In the New York Times, A.O. Scott wrote, "In the wake of his triumph as a popular filmmaker, Mr. Soderbergh seems to be trying to do two things here. One admirable, one less so. Like Schizopolis, and to a lesser degree, The Limey, which is alluded to several times, Full Frontal is an exercise in style and possibility, a sheaf of notebook jottings, to use a Godardian metaphor, on what can be done with a camera, some actors, and a script," by Coleman Huff. But such jottings, even from someone as intelligent as Mr. Soderbergh, do not always make a good reading, and the problem is that he really doesn't care.
I like A.O. Scott, always smart, worth reading, but I hate when critics make assumptions that can't be proved about an artist's intentions. As I said earlier, Soderbergh may not have cared about finding a wide audience with this film, but I believe he cared intensely about the ideas he was exploring, and he was thinking a lot about the audience. In fact, also in the New York Times, 5 days before Scott's review, Soderbergh told Elvis Mitchell, "I'm fascinated by the agreement that an audience enters into with a film. There are layers to that agreement. The first one is when you buy your ticket, and the second one is when the film starts. And I think within a certain period of time, you begin to make judgments about whether or not you want to enter into a contract with this movie. Why is that? And what is it about a movie that gets you or doesn't get you? Keeping in mind, in fact, that the thing is a construct, but this sort of idea of belief and veracity I felt would be interesting to explore if you had these two contrasting aesthetics."
And I like that quote. I do. And I wish he would have just done that job better, I guess, is what it's, for me. Is like, I just would have, I see that a little bit of it in the movie, but I wish he would have done it better.
Some things can be intellectually more successful than they are in execution, and I think that was probably true with this movie.
Yeah. I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with not having a hit every time out. Thank God there's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, for Soderbergh, one of the climactic sequences in the film, Gus's death from autoerotic asphyxia, becomes a punchline in reviews. A.O. Scott also wrote, "One of the characters in the movie has a taste for autoerotic asphyxiation, a potentially deadly form of masturbation in which the oxygen supply is cut off to produce a more intense orgasm. The practice suggests a metaphor for the picture itself, a metaphor that may, for all I know, be intended and that I will leave for you to unpack."
Ouch.
Ouch, A.O.
or
Scott.
zing or what?
Just don't hold back, buddy.
Give it to me straight, Doc. What do you really think?
And in the Sun-Times, our man Roger Ebert, in a 1.5-star review, wrote, "Every once in a while, perhaps as an exercise in humility, Steven Soderbergh makes a truly inexplicable film. There is a scene in Full Frontal where a character comes to a tragic end while masturbating. That could symbolize the method and fate of this film."
I mean, who wrote it better? I'd say Ebert wrote it better.
Why use 50 words when you can use 15? And that was Ebert's gift.
Those both hurt. But, actually, Richard Roper, who after the tragic death of Gene Siskel became Ebert's partner on At the Movies, had an uncharacteristically great and gentler line. "Full Frontal is like the special features disc of the DVD without the original movie." And I think that probably sums up a lot of viewers' experiences.
What was I trying to do with that?
I don't know. Tell me.
I guess
I thought it was.
I didn't know. I guess I didn't know how else to talk about. I guess a lot of people took it as a screw you, and I absolutely didn't mean it that way. I guess what I was trying to point out was that I don't know that it's okay to invest emotionally in. Well, first of all, that movies are not life, and that despite the fact that we've chosen an aesthetic to make you think that this section of the film was quote unquote real. That it is as much a construct as the rendezvous portion of the film, and that you shouldn't necessarily take either one more seriously than the other. And that it ultimately, this is not life, this is a movie, it is a two-dimensional art form, but that it's also legitimate to emotionally invest in a two-dimensional art form if it connects with you in some way.
Well, also we talked about the contract that we enter. You know, when you, as an audience member, we seeing a movie.
We talked about that. That if there's a contract that you have as a filmmaker with the audience, what does it say? And is there fine print?
Right. What are the rules?
That's worth exploring. Again, I think, I don't know, maybe obviously the film was meant as something of an experiment, and I think maybe in the way that it was sort of sold, that I don't know, there wasn't a way to make that more clear, that it was taken sort of more seriously in a way than it should have been.
So, Keir, you're saying regular people disliked Full Frontal as much as the critics?
Yes, they did, Mike. On a budget of $2 million, it grossed approximately $2.5 million domestic and less than $1 million international. So they liked it more than they liked Schizopolis, but that isn't saying much.
Well, I mean, you know, having Julia Roberts playing the lead instead of Steven Soderbergh, that, you know, probably helped a little.
They're both beautiful people, but Soderbergh's beauty is more of an inner beauty, let's say.
Yeah.
One result of all this failure is that the movie is practically impossible to find. It's not streaming anywhere, and hard copies are out of print. I bought a shrink-wrapped copy off Amazon Marketplace, and it arrived with the wrong movie inside.
Yes, I love that. I feel like that was some sort of weird destiny. But you sent me a picture, but I want people to know what movie was inside.
Oh my God,
here?
I can't remember the title. It was like some kind of religious propaganda. It might have been a Mormon production. It was very weirdly didactic looking, and I looked at about a minute of it and decided I wasn't even going to watch it for fun. It was religious propaganda, but unfortunately not for eventualism. I ordered another copy off eBay, and that one at least had the right disc. And the DVD extras aren't bad. Again, if like me, you choose to study this film, they include some of the improvised in-character interviews that were later used as voiceover in the finished film. Again, David Hyde Pierce's are particularly good.
Listeners, I hope you'll check out our bonus episode on how to find Soderbergh's first 12 movies. We should maybe before we start, but we're learning as we go. And we're learning also that like movies that seemingly aren't that old and from a very popular mainstream director who's still cranking out movies today are still can be difficult to find.
It is so shocking to me. I am well aware that streaming movies come and go, but I just did not think we would struggle to find several early Steven Soderbergh films.
No, and this actually harkens back. This was one of the movies in the Kafka episode. We mentioned how he was going to release via his website extension 765. Is it? Yeah.
Extension. Are you wearing the T-shirt?
Oh yeah, I am wearing a T-shirt.
Extension 765. I just read it off your chest.
Look at that. So this was one of the movies he was going to re-release through the website, a set of his own movies that he had gotten the rights back to, with Kafka / Mr. Neff being one of them. Full Frontal was another. There was a third and maybe a fourth, but I can't remember.
Bubble?
Bubble was one, for obvious reasons, which we will get to soon. If there was a fourth, I can't remember what it was.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I can't. I want to see Mr. Neff.
I do too.
Mr. Neff.
I really do.
Mike, let's do a quick check-in on what Soderbergh's peers were doing in 2002.
Yeah, well, the 2000s were a time of tentpole movies and franchise films. Top grossers were things like Spider-Man, Star Wars, Attack of the Clones, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Austin Powers, Goldmember, Men in Black 2.
Good Lord.
Yeah, not great. It's a very different decade from what we were talking about, when we were in the 90s still. If we look at the 5 other directors Soderbergh was grouped with in the book Rebels on the Backlot, David Fincher's Panic Room was a big success. It earned almost $100 million. Paul Thomas Anderson had Punch Drunk Love, which was kind of a bomb despite, or depending on how you fall on this, maybe because of Adam Sandler. And Spike Jonze brought out Adaptation, his second collaboration with Charlie Kaufman, which despite the acclaim and I think won a Best Supporting for Chris Cooper Academy Award, maybe, and Best Actor for, is this Nick Cage's? No. Yeah, he was at least nominated for this. He won for Leaving Las Vegas. He was at least nominated for this. And I believe Chris Cooper won Best Supporting.
I believe Cooper won.
I believe Cooper won. But despite that, it's probably hasn't made his money back yet, I don't think.
Probably not. Loved Adaptation. Liked Punch Drunk Love. Hardly remember Panic Room, weirdly.
I kind of love all three. And Panic Room is a little, even by Fincher standards, a little cold, but Adaptation and Punch Drunk Love are still movies I enjoy and love. I'll still watch Panic Room. But anyway, but others weren't even, making movies. The other directors we're talking about, David O. Russell was still in the wilderness after the fallout of Three Kings in 1999. Despite being successful, he had that a lot of behind the scenes stuff, including with George Clooney, who ultimately got the last laugh. He's doing okay. And Quentin Tarantino still hadn't made anything after Jackie Brown in 1997. And of course, Soderbergh has another movie coming out in November.
Part of the reason you go and make a movie for $2 million is to allow yourself certain creative freedoms and allow yourself the opportunity to try some things that you wouldn't try in a $90 million movie. And I did that. I mean, the movie is very much what I wanted it to be and what I intended it to be, both in its content and in its form. And the good news is, it doesn't have to be beloved by a huge number of people because it costs $2 million. And so perhaps a braver person would make a movie as weird as Full Frontal for $90 million, but I think that would be ill-advised.
Mike, Full Frontal, for all its strengths and weaknesses, is about relationships. But it's also about Hollywood, a subject Hollywood just can't get enough of. The list of films about films and filmmaking and the acting life and Hollyweird is endless and includes a lot of navel-gazing or maybe autoerotic masturbation.
Hi-oh.
Full Frontal reminded me of some indie takes like Steve Buscemi's 1995 directorial debut, Living in Oblivion, also starring Catherine Keener. That was a fun little movie.
I like that movie, yeah.
And Mike Figgis's Time Code, another ensemble film about film.
Mm-hmm.
Soderbergh never mentions this that I know of, but it seems relevant.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, what are your favorite films in this genre? Like, if you didn't like Full Frontal, which ones did you like?
We always, we always circle back to the man, the T-Man, Big T, Quentin Tarantino. But you know what? Like I said, I like movies that tap into like objective looks at the inside, like Sunset Boulevard, stuff like that like give you, well, it's history now, but the objective looks at like the inside of Hollywood. But I especially like, just movies that are, because I'm obsessed. I mean, I'm here, so I'm obsessed with Hollywood history and behind the scenes stuff. So movies that tap into that, like Babylon. I love silent film. I love that era. It's a fascinating era. That's why I really adored that movie. But, I'll talk a little bit about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood here, which is also a movie that I think is great, maybe Tarantino's best. And it's just, what I love about it, and it fits comfortably into this thing that I love about Hollywood movies. That's just the it's this love letter to saving Hollywood, this history that I love, that Tarantino loves, that you love. Like, you know, way smarter people than me have said that, you know, Sharon Tate's murder was, in a way, it was the death of glitzy studio Hollywood in the 50s and 60s. And it was the start of the 70s realism, grittiness, things like that, the more cynical part of Hollywood. Now, there were a lot of factors at play here, not just what happened tragically to Sharon Tate, but Tarantino, like many of us, was like he did with Inglourious Bastards. He's again playing this what if angle. And like I said, he's thinking, like many of us, like, what if something different happened? And in this case, what if Tate hadn't been murdered? You know, what if a studio actor and his stuntman saved not just Sharon Tate, but all of Hollywood, you know, Hollywood as we know it. If Sharon Tate hadn't been murdered, like, you know, again, Bastards and Hitler, if Sharon Tate hadn't been murdered and things went that contributed to things going a very different direction, you know, what would Hollywood have been, you know? And it's a really, really interesting question. I don't think he's just answering the question. I think he's also just kind of wrapping his arms around this like studio classic Hollywood, that when we think of Hollywood, it's not that anymore. But it's what we think of Hollywood. That's what we think of. It's like this classic, the big Hollywood sign and the stars and those kind of movies and the studios. Like that is Hollywood. It's kind of most, I don't want to say generically known, but just most lovingly known. And it's a cool thing that he did that really taps into that really love of cinema that we share. But beyond that, ultimately, like, I like movies that capture that feeling of Hollywood, you know, like that's, again, Babylon, Ed Wood. It's not a great movie, but I do really enjoy Bogdanovich's another ode to silent film, Nickelodeon. I'm a sucker for silent. I'm a sucker for Bogdanovich. Just the place, the magic of the movies. Like, I'm not a fan of movies that come out and say Hollywood is so fake, you know, it's the real relationships that matter and this place is phony. It's like, no, I know, like, but
Stop telling me that.
Right. I'm here for the magic. You know, that's why we love movies. It casts, and I don't want, you know, I can go on this for so long, and the more I go, the more generic I'll sound, but it's the spell it casts, the Hollywood spell, the movie industry, movie making spell, and the movies themselves. That's what I'm here for. You know, anybody comes out and like The Player, you know, it's like, man, I don't fucking want to like spend 3 hours in this, you know. I love Altman, but I just don't.
Mike, you brought a tear to my eye with this rant. Wasn't a rant; it was a polemic. No, you did. I absolutely love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as I've discussed often. I have very complicated feelings about Quentin Tarantino. I have very uncomplicated feelings about that film. I love it. I want to go see it on the big screen again if I can. I actually do like The Player. I really enjoy it a lot, but I probably don't need to see it again. I've seen it several times. I'm probably good.
Fair, yeah.
Ed Wood is one of my all-time favorites. And one of the reasons I like that so much is, to me, it's about the magic of making movies. And it reminds me of when I was a kid running around with the Super 8 camera, later a camcorder, you know, making movies with my friends. And I think it's the same thing that Soderbergh has talked about again and again. What he likes most is the process of making the movies. He likes being with a group of friends, running around with the camera, making it happen. He's not a big red carpet guy. He's not a big, you know, like, I mean, he makes himself available. He speaks to people, but he's not all about showing up and giving speeches and accepting adulation. He wants to be on the set making a movie. And Ed Wood, not a good filmmaker, but it's just so endearing the way that film portrays this group of misfits against all odds coming together to make a film. And they, of course, see themselves as potential stars. They think what they're doing is in the great Hollywood tradition. And it's not, but you can't help but love them for it. And it's really one of Johnny Depp's best performances. He's a guy whose acting has gotten steadily worse over the years, but he has something, and he has made some great films, and that is one of them. Adaptation is one of my all-time favorites. I just find that film endlessly entertaining. Just about partly as I'm not that neurotic, but as a writer who, you know, we all question our choices sometimes. It's a great look at the challenges of bringing something to the screen. Sunset Boulevard. Nobody needs me to say anything about that, but it's a stone cold classic. In a Lonely Place, Bogart film was another favorite of mine. Again, about a screenwriter. Not so much about Hollywood, but in and of Hollywood, and just a great Bogart film that kind of became rediscovered later on as like, wait a minute, we should be looking at this one also. And it's funny. There's this film I keep. This is a footnote, but I keep wanting to rewatch this film that I saw like when it came out. Kevin Bacon made a film called The Big Picture.
Oh yeah,
and it was just a really lighthearted, like goofy mishaps of like trying to get a movie made that I remember like really enjoying at the time. And I keep thinking like, oh, I'd like to see that again. It wasn't like a dark one. It seemed like I probably don't even need to include it here, but it just came to mind while I was making this list, and I was like, oh yeah, I'd like to see that again.
Yeah, it's a nice one. Yeah, I haven't seen it in many, many years, but yes, I do remember it fondly.
Those are a few of my favorites, and I won't list them all here, but I'm also a huge fan of documentaries about the making of films. In particular, my son Cosmo and I really enjoy documentaries about films that didn't get made, and that's an interesting subgenre. Someday, we hope to program a series with the Music Box. If you're listening, reach out to us. Because I think that would just be really, really fun to share some of those films. It's a wonderful subgenre.
That lore of like what could have been, who different director was attached or any of that sort of stuff is like, wow. That's always so fascinating.
It's the eternal what if.
Yes.
Wait a minute. Haven't I seen you before? I know your face.
Get out, or shall I call my servant?
You're Norma Desmond. Used to be in silent pictures. Used to be big.
I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
Listeners, please be sure to let us know your favorite films about filmmaking. You can reach us on Instagram at The Filmographers, on X at FilmographerPod, and on Letterboxd at Filmographers. Or just send us a good old-fashioned email at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, please, we beg you. You can't see me, but I'm down on my knees and I'm begging. Well, not really, but just imagine it's fine.
I'm sitting in a comfortable chair begging.
Yeah, exactly. I'm counting my feet up. Subscribe, please subscribe on your platform of choice and write a good review. It only takes a second. And tell your film-loving friends to join us on our journey to watch all the films of Steven Soderbergh.
If you really, really want to show your support, find us on Patreon. Each dollar makes it easier for us to share our passion for movies with you. Thanks in advance.
And a very special thank you, as always, to Kevin Lau, our producer, Gompson, who composed and played our theme music, and Cosmo Graff, who designed our logo.
Join us next week on the Filmographers podcast when we'll discuss Soderbergh's second film of 2002, Polaris.
Clooney and Soderbergh reunited. Surely for another box office smash, right?
A remake of a cult Soviet-era science fiction movie? Let's just say it didn't give Star Wars Attack of the Clones a run for its money.
Maybe if they got Clooney instead of Cloney.
Star Wars Attack of the Cloonies.